Let us talk to Dr. Rakib Ehsan, independent expert in British public attitudes, a man who has said many very, very sage things in the past and who I'm sure will say the same sage things again today. Rakib, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thanks for coming on this morning. I want to tackle the problem of racism in this country because I'm one of those people who believes that this is not a racist country by any way, shape or form. Because of what happened on Sunday night at Wembley, we have been led to believe that there are a lot of racist people in this country. I'm not sure that that's true, but the ones who are racist in this country and who we keep saying will always be racist, I think need to be found. I think they need to be expunged in some way, and I think they need to be removed from this country because they're a stain on it.
Mike, I think that in terms of looking at the country as a whole, I'd say that England is one of the most tolerant, anti-discrimination, pro-equality nations on earth. And there's a range of survey data which supports that. What we do have, though, we do still have a hardcore fringe of racist bigots, and some of them have indulged in racist abuse being directed towards Jadon Sancho, Marcus Rashford, and Bukayo Saka after they missed their penalties against Italy in the final on Sunday night. I agree with you in that much of this abuse is taking place on social media. I think there should be more rigorous verification processes before you're able to open a social media account. What we have are a number of people who are clearly racist. They hide behind their social media account. I'd also make the point that much of this racist abuse being directed towards those England players, they seem to be foreign-based accounts.
Yeah, what do we know about that? Because we heard Gareth Southgate saying that, and there was no further information given. Does that suggest to you that they're Italian? Does it suggest to you that they're from some other part of the world?
The thing is, Mike, it's so easy for people to open social media accounts across a range of platforms. It's very difficult to tell, which is why I do think there needs to be a rigorous verification process. So that creates a situation where people are prevented from hiding behind their social media accounts and directing racist abuse, whether it's towards English footballers or other people using those platforms.
Yes, and that is the trouble, isn't it? Because it is all entirely now operational on social media. And I can't understand, and many people in the last 2 days have been calling for it, I can't understand why the social media giants, the tech giants, effectively, Twitter, Facebook, Google, YouTube, all of those people cannot actually operate. They can operate in a very sophisticated way in the sense that they can track you and I. You know, they can send you a warning if they don't like one of your tweets because it's got the wrong phrase in it. But what they can't seem to do is to shut these people down.
It's a numbers game for them, isn't it, Mike? That's what it is. They ultimately like the idea, oh, we have X number of users on our platform. When really, to be honest, that's the wrong approach. They should try and create a platform in line with their supposedly anti-racist spirit.
Yeah.
And I think part of that has to be bringing forward and implementing rigorous verification processes, which ultimately means that people who would like to direct racist abuse and hide behind their social media accounts are no longer able to do so.
And exactly right. And you made the point as well on your Twitter, and I'm aware that we're talking about it, so I'm not going to be hypocritical here, but you made the point on your Twitter account. 31 million people watched the final of the Euros, and a very small percentage of those people are the ones we are talking about. But rather like the ones who broke into the stadium, rather like the people that I've been told were witnessed snorting cocaine and smoking on the underground, lawless types, young white men who seem to be out of control, who seem to pay no attention to the laws whatsoever. You know, they're still an important bunch of people to talk about because they're ruining stuff for a lot of other people.
Absolutely. And I think that we shouldn't hide away from the fact that there has been a significant amount of moral decay in English society.
Yeah.
We shouldn't try to blanket that. We shouldn't cover that. If we want to live in a more stable society, and if we want to encourage responsible forms of behavior, we have to call out irresponsible forms of behavior. And that was certainly on show in the build up to the game. People looking to break into Wembley Stadium, people who didn't have tickets. To be honest, I just think the level of public disorder in the lead up to the match is unacceptable. And I think we need to be honest about that. Once again, though, I'd make the point, the vast majority of people in England What they did, they watched the game in the comfort of their homes with their loved ones, with their families. And that is very much what the mainstream England is all about. And that is the point I wanted to make in terms of the racist abuse being directed towards Rashford, Sancho, and Saka. It's a hardcore fringe of racist bigots that they're in no way representative of mainstream England, who I would think are heartbroken for those players for missing those penalties, and they would really want them to bounce back stronger from that traumatic, that undoubtedly traumatic event in their footballing careers.
Yeah, no, listen, I was very critical, not very critical, but critical yesterday of Gareth Southgate. I think he made some mistakes in the final. I think he made some tactical errors, and that should be able to be said without being accused of being 100%. In any way, a horrible person. Because there is that other part of British society, which is the, do no harms section, where they say, oh, you can't be critical of anyone because that's not very nice. Well, I'm sorry, if you're paid a lot of money and you're supposed to do a job, you're supposed to do that job. But I was in no way and never would be critical of the kids taking the penalties, because that's a tough job, and they stood up and they took the chance and they put their lives on the line and they put their heads on the line, and they failed. But that's life. We move on. But what I can't understand, Rakib, and you and I have spoken many times, we've met each other many times, we know each other pretty well. I don't understand people who view other people based on the colour of their skin. I just don't get it.
I think it's ridiculous, and I think it's unfortunate that as the penalty shootout was unfolding, I did sense that again that there would be a fringe in society that would view the penalty shootout through the lens of race, and I think that's quite, I think that's a crying shame for our democratic.
But what do you
society.
think it's about? Is it about their upbringing? Is it about their nurture? Is it about their nature? What is it about?
I think upbringing would definitely come into it, Mike. I don't think there's no questioning the fact that the kind of the kind of upbringing that you've received, the parental attitudes in one's formative years, that counts for a lot in terms of how they view different groups in society. But once again, I'd really make the point, Mike, that it's very much a fringe. It's a fringe section of our society, and I think it's really important that when in the build-up to the final, there was a wave of solidarity which swept across the country. The vast majority of people in England, when it comes to framing English identity itself, they're more likely to frame it in civic terms as opposed to racial terms, Mike. It's more about how people fulfill their economic obligations, how they contribute to their local communities and wider society. That's how people frame English identity, as opposed to focusing on one's racial identity and ethnic origin. So I think what we have to do, we have to call out racism whenever we see it. We have to come up with robust measures to tackle it. My issue in this particular context is that we've had progressive voices use that racist fringe and try to depict the whole of England that way, or rather, this is the mainstream feeling. And
I think that's also wrong and also dangerous, because I'm not having that. And there are some people on the left. I mean, I've already seen, for example, the last couple of days, some of these horrible videos from Leicester Square where these idiots are sort of, marching about, shouting racist slogans and all of that, where you've got people going, oh yeah, this is what you get because of Brexit. And you're going, what are you talking about? It's got nothing to do with Brexit. These are people who are ghastly, who are vile, who need to be stricken really out of any meaningful role in our society. It's got absolutely nothing to do with politics. It's got nothing to do with Brexit. It's got nothing to do with any right-wing political ideology. It's got everything to do with hatred.
Well, I mean, I think the idea that if we voted to remain in the EU, this wouldn't be taking place, I think that's quite questionable. If I'm being completely honest, I think that people need to focus at the issue, on the issue at hand. I think that Tyrone Mings' intervention, in terms of criticising the Home Secretary Priti Patel, who said that fans have a right to boo, and in the sense that she'd stoked these racist sentiments. Right. The idea that racist people are taking their cues from the Home Secretary Priti Patel is absolutely.
I mean, I think Tyrone Mings is quite a thoughtful individual, but I think he got this one wrong, and I think so. He should have taken a lesson out of the leaf of actually Marcus Rashford's book and said, look, if you get involved in politics, you enter an area that you're not very familiar with. In fact, for Priti Patel to say that taking the knee was gesture politics, I think she's entirely correct. I think it is gesture politics. And in fact, what we've seen is that taking the knee actually didn't make anything change, did it?
Well, I think that what it is, when you're looking at the act of taking the knee, firstly, people will naturally associate it with the BLM movement, and in turn, they'll associate with radical objectives such as stripping police forces of their resources, overthrowing the market economy, support for direct action. They'll also think about things which took place at BLM demonstrations, so the defacing of Sir Winston Churchill's statue, black police officers in London being racially abused. That was actually on the rise during those BLM demonstrations. So people are perfectly within their right to question the usefulness of taking the knee from an anti-racism perspective. And as you've said, I question the effectiveness of taking the knee. What we need are robust and practical measures to combat racism, which continues to take place in British society.
Yes. And so, I mean, we've fought this for a long time, Rakib. I mean, you've lived in this country all your life. You have been a British man in this country all your life. You've lived in a place called Luton, which has got, interesting problems of its own. What's your view of how racism has changed or differed or affected you over the course of the last few decades?
Well, I think for me, firstly, as you know, Luton is an interesting place. It's predominantly working class, hyper diverse. But actually, find a way overall to get along in terms of the relations between different communities. Luton has had its fair share of problems. It's had Islamist protests. It's also the birthplace of the English Defence League. But once again, growing up and seeing those extremes, what's really important, you have to concentrate on the mainstream. You're always, without sounding too pessimistic, you're always going to have those unhealthy fringes in society. Yeah. I think they are going to always exist to an extent. But what you really need to focus on is the fact that the mainstream, on the whole, are tolerant, they're fair, they have meritocratic values, and ultimately they're more interested in what someone brings to the table as a person and their attitude, as opposed to the color of their skin and where they can trace their origins. I think that's the key. And I think it's always important to remember that when we're tackling these kind of sensitive issues surrounding race and identity. There's definitely a discussion to be had in terms of how we tackle racially and religiously motivated abuse in Britain. I would like to see tougher criminal penalties in terms of combating that kind of behavior. But by the way, Mike, this is irrespective of the target group, irrespective of what kind of racial and what kind of racial discrimination or ethnically driven abuse that may be. I do think that we need to bring those tougher sanctions that you speak of. I definitely feel that needs to be reflected in our laws.
Yeah, I think so. Because I think part of the reason that some of these stupid idiots do what they do is because they don't have any fear. I was watching the videos of these kids breaking into Wembley the other night, and they were basically just rolling over the security guards because they knew that nothing was going to happen to them and that they would probably be successful because they did it against the security guards during the Denmark game, and they did it again on Sunday night. But, somebody pointed out to me yesterday, there was no trouble during the Russian Football World Cup in 2018. Guess why? Because the Russian ultras made it pretty clear that if the English supporters came over and tried to do anything that was anything like the hooligan behaviour we've seen before, they would get very badly smashed up.
Well, I'd make the point, Mike, and I think this is something that we both agree on. I think this country has become a soft touch when it comes to law and order. And I think it's quite remarkable, really, that we've had the Conservatives in power for 11 years now. And if they really want to be seen as this inclusive, anti-racist Conservative party, then part of that has to be introducing a law and order regime which effectively tackles and robustly tackles this kind of social disorder. That kind of public disorder does not serve Britain's reputation well. It doesn't serve England's reputation well at all on the international stage. And even though, if you look at, if you set it against the wider population, this you could describe it as fringe idiocy. it is the kind of social disorder which needs to be robustly tackled.
Well, it is. I
And
mean,
we have
yes.
yeah.
I mean, you can call it fringe idiocy, and you're not wrong to call it that. However, it does have very, very far-reaching effects. You know, I saw loads of
Absolutely.
stories over the weekend of people who had taken their kids to Wembley, only to witness these ghastly scenes of men beating up other men for no other reason than they were wearing an Italian shirt. I mean, that's not a night out for your family, is it?
Absolutely not, Mike. And I'm so glad that you raised this point. I'm sure there are families up and down this country who would love to take their children to those kind of sporting events, but they'll see events that they'll see those kind of images, and they'll be massively put off by it because they wouldn't want to put their family in a position of danger.
No.
Mike, as you know, I'm a passionate England supporter. I follow football religiously, but the reality of the matter is, I see those kind of images. Even I wouldn't really want to be near it. If truth be told.
Yeah, no, me
so
neither.
as you say, yeah. So as you say, even though you have this as a select band of people who really don't have any respect for the rule of law, which, to be honest, they call themselves patriots, but they can't even stick to their own laws of the land.
These are patriots who
which is quite
smash up their own capital city. You know, that's not patriotism
absolutely,
to me.
and they're such patriots. They're perfectly comfortable with creating all kinds of damage in London, in their capital city. So I would like to see a robust political response to it, and I would like to see the introduction of new laws which tackles that kind of public disorder, which could be very off-putting for passionate sports fans who would like to attend those events but wouldn't want to be near it because they wouldn't like to place their families in a position of danger.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Rakib, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Dr. Rakib Ehsan